why does the translation of Genesis 3:16 vary? And so I did a short on this, but I wanted to unpack it a little bit more. And so if we get the passage up, we can see here, this is Genesis 3:16 in the ESV and the NIV. And for context, Adam and Eve have eaten the fruit, and God has cursed the serpent already, and then he turns to Eve. And he says some stuff about childbirth, and then he says this. In ESV, he says, your desire shall be contrary to your husband, but he shall rule over you. But in the NIV, he says, your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you. And so we're left with this question, well, which is it? Is it contrary or for? Because those are two very different interpretations. And the crux of the problem is the Hebrew word behind this, which is el, not to be confused with El, which means God. This is el. And el can often be translated as, and most commonly translated as towards or for. But in very rare circumstances where the context suggests there's some sense of conflict, it can be translated as against. And so we get a great example of this in the very next chapter in Genesis 4, where it says this, Cain spoke to his Abel, his brother, and when they were in the field, Cain rose up against his brother Abel and killed him. And this word against is the same word, el. And so coming back to Genesis 3:16, the word can be translated as both to or for and contrary or against. It can go either way. And so then we're left with a question, well, then which one do we go for if it can be translated both ways? And so let's just take them one at a time. So let's start with the NIV translation. Your desire will be for your husband and he will rule over you. And as I've studied this translation, a lot of time the interpretation that inevitably comes out of it is that pastors will end up saying, look, some variation of women are weaker, women need a man, their desire is for a man to be submissive and to be led, or maybe their desire is to procreate and have children, and because of that reason they need a man, and therefore men need to rule over them because that's what women need. I am against this interpretation. I think it does women a complete disservice, and I think it's more about said pastors and preachers bringing their own understanding of male-female dynamics into it rather than allowing the Bible to shape those. And as I say, this seems to be the predominant interpretation that naturally seems to come out of this translation. And so for that reason, I'm happy just to kind of put that translation aside. And so then let's look at your desire shall be contrary to your husband, but he shall rule over you. What kind of interpretations come out of that translation? And for context, this kind of bit where God is speaking to Adam and to Eve, I would describe as God being descriptive rather than prescriptive. What do I mean by that? God curses the serpent, but he doesn't curse Adam and Eve. The word curse is never used with them. Instead, he is describing the consequences of their actions. Now that they've done this, now they've stepped out on their own, taken the fruit of knowledge of good and evil, they are now going to have to face the consequences of their actions. And so God isn't saying this is how it should be. It's just saying this is how it is. This is the result of what you've done. And before this point, Adam and Eve have never disagreed. They've always been on the same page and always been in union about everything. But now that they have this knowledge of good and evil, there's going to be disagreements between them. Their desires are going to be contrary. And so what God is saying to Eve is that, hey, now because of this, there are going to be times where your desires are contrary to your husband. And in those moments, he's going to rule over you. He's going to have the final say. And I think if we look at this through this is the consequences, this is the reality of your actions. If we look at human history, men have had the final say. Men have been the ones to make the decisions. And so I think this would be seen as an apt description of what both Eve and all future women are going to face. And to be clear, this is descriptive, not prescriptive. This is not saying how it should be. And I think as part of being believers, as part of being redeemed by Christ, we get to redeem this. We get to change this and revert this and bring things back to when men and women were equal and work together. But I think this is how we should understand this passage. Isn't that God is saying, hey, you're a weak woman and you need to be ruled by your husband. But actually, look, the reality is you two are going to disagree. He's going to have the final say. And that's the consequences of the decision you've made. I hope you found that helpful. Let me know if you agree or disagree in the comments below. This was a snippet of a much larger conversation which you can find here, or you can get plugged in with our Bible in a Year commentary just there. Otherwise, I hope to see you in the next video.